Tonight at 10, the King travels to Sandringham as he steps back from public life at the start of his cancer treatment. He travelled with the Queen from Buckingham Palace and flew to the royal estate in Norfolk. Before leaving, he met Prince Harry at Clarence House, who'd just flown in from California to be by his side. Also tonight, thousands of women given drugs to treat epilepsy, which harmed their unborn children. Calls for them to get urgent financial help after a 40-year fight. The dangerous lure of conspiracy theories on social media. We report on the man who survived this mass shooting in Las Vegas and became convinced the whole thing had been staged. And how 3 students have used AI to read for the first time this 2,000-year-old scroll discovered in volcanic ash near Pompeii.
On BBC London, a father's fight for justice. 6 years after his son was stabbed in a park, his killers are jailed for life. He speaks exclusively to BBC London.
Good evening. The King has been seen for the first time after revealing he has cancer. He travelled by helicopter from Buckingham Palace to Sandringham, the royal estate in Norfolk, with the Queen this afternoon. Before he left, he met Prince Harry, who'd flown in from California today, their first face-to-face meeting since the King's coronation last May. It's not known how long the Duke of Sussex is staying in the UK, but it's understood there are no plans for Prince Harry and Prince William to meet while he's here. Today, the Prime Minister said the King's cancer had been caught early, though it hasn't been revealed which type of cancer he's being treated for. Our royal correspondent, Daniela Relf, reports.
A first image of the King since news of his cancer diagnosis was made public, being driven into Buckingham Palace with his wife, Queen Camilla, after beginning his treatment in a London hospital. This afternoon, the couple headed by helicopter to the Sandringham estate in Norfolk, where the King will spend time resting in between treatment. It's a place those who work with him say he finds solace and happiness. Before he left London, there was a family visitor to host. Straight from the airport to see his father, the Duke of Sussex is back in the UK, flying in from his home in California. He spent around 45 minutes in Clarence House with the King, who'd phoned him to tell him of his cancer diagnosis. But there are no plans for Prince Harry to meet up with his brother, the Prince of Wales. It's understood there is nothing in the diary. The focus instead has been on Harry and his father. The two had not seen each other since the coronation. With the King clearing his diary and focusing on his cancer treatment, royal duties are now for the wider family. Princess Anne carried out an investiture at Windsor Castle this morning. She already has one of the busiest royal diaries. She then travelled to Nottingham for some scheduled engagements there. With the Queen, the Prince of Wales and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, she is likely to have to take on more public duties to support the King while he's unwell. Princess Anne said nothing about the cancer diagnosis, but earlier the Prime Minister offered his support to the royal family.
Like everyone else, shocked and sad, and just all our thoughts are with him and his family. And thankfully, this has been caught early, and now everyone will be wishing him that he gets the treatment that he needs and makes a full recovery.
The King will now rely heavily on the support of his family, both privately and publicly. Last Friday, the Queen opened a new support centre for cancer patients and their families at a hospital in North London. She came here already knowing of her husband's diagnosis.
That visit last week must have been incredibly challenging on a personal level for the Queen.
Can't imagine how difficult last week must have been for her, knowing that life was changing and had been turned upside down. But what happens quite quickly after a cancer diagnosis is that a treatment path emerges.
With his family on Christmas Day at Sandringham, the King is now back here, for the time being out of the public eye, to concentrate on his recovery.
Daniela's with me now. So the King stepped back from public life. His family rallies around him, but no sign of any sort of reconciliation between the two young princes for now.
No sign of a reconciliation at all. And I think the fact that they haven't met, you have to read into that. It gives us some sign of the state of their relationship, that even in these circumstances, with their father unwell, that this is a sibling relationship that seems to be well and truly broken. Harry is very rarely in the UK, but there are no plans for him to see his brother William. Sources tell us that there is nothing in the diary. What that also means is that he won't be seeing his sister-in-law, the Princess of Wales, who has been unwell and is someone who he was once very, very close to. What we don't know at this stage, if there has been any attempt from either side to reach out, if there has been any attempt to find a truce at all. But as of this evening, there is no sign of that. But what we will see tomorrow is Prince William back on royal duty for the first time in more than 3 weeks. He has 2 engagements, one in Windsor and one in London. He had stepped back from public duty for a while to help his wife, the Princess of Wales, recover after surgery.
Daniela, thank you. The US Court of Appeal has ruled that the former president, Donald Trump, does not have immunity from charges that he plotted to overturn his election defeat in 2020. Judges rejected the claim that he couldn't be prosecuted because he was still in post as president at the time. His legal team say they will challenge the ruling. Mr. Trump has called it a witch hunt. Let's speak to our North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, who's outside the courtroom in Washington. How big of a setback is this for Donald Trump?
Well, Sophie, of all the cases that Donald Trump faces, this is the most serious one. And it deals really with those attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Now, Donald Trump argued that anything he'd done while president made him immune from prosecution. The court said today he is citizen Trump, not President Trump, and does not have that protection. Now, Donald Trump has continued to try and delay these cases as much as possible, and he will appeal. But if he can delay them until after the November election, he can simply make them go away. If he wins that election, he can decide to tell his Department of Justice to drop them. The problem for him is that if he goes to trial and loses, there are significant numbers of voters in key marginal states who are telling pollsters that they won't vote for a convicted felon. Sophie, the timing and the outcome of this election are not just important for the November This case are not just important for November's election, but for the future of American politics.
Gary, thank you. The families of thousands of children in England who were harmed after their mothers were given a drug to treat epilepsy while they were pregnant should receive urgent financial help. That's the verdict of a report by the Patient Safety Watchdog, which is being published tomorrow after people affected have fought for decades to get help. The report also looks at women who've suffered terribly after operations using pelvic mesh and concludes they too should also get help. The government's being warned that if they do not act, it will show a callous disregard for the suffering that patients have been through. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson reports.
There was people in the health authority that knew about all of this, and I wasn't told.
Why did it take for me to have 4 children before somebody said, that child looks like it's got sodium valproate syndrome?
It felt like cheese wire that was running around my groin.
A handful of the thousands of women who've been fighting for justice, some for 40 years, after medical treatments went badly wrong.
Hi, Andy.
I first filmed with Andy 7 years ago.
It's Sevie!
Oh, how lovely to see you.
He's now 25, but will never live independently. He has severe learning disabilities and autism caused by the epilepsy drug sodium valproate that his mum Emma was on when she was pregnant.
Oh, you did drama today?
And I'm the big bad wolf today. I'm the big bad wolf.
Andy is one of an estimated 20,000 children in the UK harmed. Tomorrow, the first redress scheme in England proposing financial help for them will be published. But his mum Emma is sceptical.
This is just a proposal. I know that there's going to be years until this actually comes into fruition. And then for me to try and trust these people, to actually believe that this is going to be until Andy dies.
The scheme also recommends help for the 10,000 women in England harmed by pelvic mesh, used to treat incontinence and prolapse, but which left some women like Sadie with debilitating injuries.
In December I went into hospital, I was suicidal. The pain got too much, couldn't manage it. I'm not able to be a mum. that I need to be. My 15-year-old son has had to undress me to help me into bed because the pain has been too much.
The proposal by the Patient Safety Commissioner is for a two-stage redress scheme, an interim payment due next year for those directly harmed, £20,000 for victims of mesh and £100,000 for sodium valproate, followed by a main scheme offering further financial and non-financial help tailored to families' needs. The Commissioner has compared the number of children harmed by sodium valproate to thalidomide, the most notorious birth defect story in history.
This is a scandal that's bigger than thalidomide. People have been campaigning for this for decades.
And she told us that ministers must now listen and introduce the redress scheme.
If the patients still don't have their voices heard, then it really shows that there's a callous disregard for the pain and the suffering that all of these patients and families have experienced.
But the government in England is yet to confirm whether it will accept the scheme to give financial redress to families like these who have suffered for so many years. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News.
The government is preparing to offer dentists cash incentives to take on NHS patients amid a shortage of dental practices. It comes as hundreds of people have been queuing for the second day in a row to try to register at a new NHS dental practice in Bristol, from where Dan Johnson has sent us this report.
This is the queue that symbolises the struggle to see the dentist right across England.
I don't know how long it's going to be.
And many, like Adema, are back here for a second day.
We can't even get seen. My children ain't been to the dentist since before COVID. This is ridiculous. And then I go and sign up to other ones in Bristol. There's no dentists.
This is kind of broken Britain personified, isn't it, really? You know, desperate people queuing. It's like Soviet Britain.
He was here yesterday as well.
They needed bouncers because this area's been so short of dentists since this practice closed last summer. Shirley and Mary were braced for a long wait.
I've only got 7. The rest are in my pocket. There they are. It's not just dentists, it's hospitals, schools, education.
Lack of investment in national health, basically. Yeah, but there's a lot of people who work very hard to get this open, so that's the positive.
The problem is that dentists have been leaving the profession or switching to more lucrative private work because their NHS contracts don't seem to pay them enough to meet the rising demand.
They have been queuing up since 4:30 in the morning.
The new dentist here registered 800 patients yesterday, and they've got 5,000 much-needed places.
Simply put, they are desperate. I feel sad, my heart goes out to them, but there's only so much we can do and so much we can offer. It's at breaking point now, I think, or it's already broken, we're trying to fix it.
After a few hours queuing, there's a smile on Adema's face.
Yes, we definitely got an appointment now.
But many more are still waiting, and a government plan to improve dentistry is on the way. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Bristol.
Our health editor, Hugh Pym, is with me now. And these details are due to be published tomorrow, but you've already seen some of what the government is proposing.
Yes, Sophie, some of the detail was released unexpectedly, but not all of it. It's a plan to tackle so-called dental deserts, with MPs' postbags apparently pretty full of correspondence on this issue. Now, back in 2022, BBC News reported research showing 9 out of 10 NHS dental practices were not taking any more adults for treatment, and that patients were sometimes driving hundreds of miles to find a dentist or even being forced to pull out their own teeth. Now, this led to a parliamentary inquiry, and tomorrow the government and NHS in England will set out plans to try to deal with these issues, including creating 2.5 million more appointments over the next 12 months, funding more payments to dentists to take on people who hadn't had any NHS care for the last 2 years, and a £20,000 incentive plan to get dentists to move to underserved areas and stay there for 3 years. It's going to cost £200 million, but it appears this money will come from existing health budgets. Now, dental associations tonight are pretty sceptical about all this, will want to see the detail. Labour is saying it's a result of 14 years of Conservative neglect.
Keep him. Thank you. The former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng has announced he will be standing down from Parliament at the next general election. Mr Kwarteng, who served as Liz Truss's Chancellor for 10 weeks, joins a list of around 50 Conservative MPs quitting ahead of the vote, which is expected later this year. A jury at the Old Bailey has been shown police body cam footage of the moment a mother on the run with her newborn baby was arrested in Brighton last year. Constance Martin and her partner Mark Gordon refused to tell police officers where their baby was. The couple are on trial for the manslaughter by gross negligence of their newborn girl, Victoria. They both denied the charge. A mother in the United States has been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter after her 15-year-old son killed 4 students in a mass shooting at a school. He shot them with a gun his parents had bought for him. Our North America correspondent John Sudworth reports.
Amid an epidemic of US school shootings, this is a legal first. A criminal trial not of a perpetrator, but a parent.
Jennifer Crumbley didn't pull the trigger that day, but she is responsible for those deaths.
15-year-old Ethan Crumbley had already been convicted for the shooting at an earlier trial. But prosecutors argued that his mother, 45-year-old Jennifer Crumbley, had been grossly negligent. Despite her son's deteriorating mental health and his disturbing drawings of shootings, she had failed to stop him accessing the gun he had been bought for Christmas.
That was the hardest thing I had to stomach, is that my child harmed and killed other people.
Her defence lawyers argued she had done all she could and that the trial set a dangerous precedent for struggling parents who shouldn't be held responsible for every action of their children. But the Michigan jury disagreed,
We find the defendant guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
delivering a landmark guilty verdict on 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 1 for each of the students her son shot dead. She could face a decade or more in prison, and she'll be sentenced at a later date. John Sudworth, BBC News, New York.
More than 50,000 people died a year ago in the devastating earthquakes that hit parts of Turkey and Syria. Early this morning, people gathered in what remains of the Turkish city of Antakya to mark the moment the first quake struck. Our correspondent Anna Foster reported from southern Turkey a year ago, and she's back there for us now. Anna.
Sophie, I still remember very clearly when we spoke at this time exactly a year ago amidst the darkness and the chaos, and this was a disaster that was still unfolding. Now, a year on, people finally know the scale of it, but they still don't know what the future is likely to look like. People across this part of southern Turkey still live in fear of another earthquake hitting their homes, and day-to-day life is difficult and dangerous. Everything from education, which has been really fallen apart for children in this part of the country. But the biggest issue now is the homelessness crisis that this earthquake has left behind. People living through this bitterly cold Turkish winter in tents and container homes that were supposed to be a temporary solution. I was at a protest in Antakya earlier today where people waved black placards and chanted slogans against the government, who many people blame for not acting quickly enough and for not keeping promises to build enough homes for people to have solid roofs over their head. And at this stage, a year on, the future for people still isn't clear, and there's still no indication when their difficult lives are likely to improve.
Now the rubble is going. The scars are clear to see. The city of Antakya is a wasteland. More than 200,000 buildings were destroyed by the earthquake. And the work to clear and rebuild is still going on, even now. Not everyone is able to move on. Abu Mustafa often returns to the place where he used to live. He managed to save his 3 youngest children, but when their home fell, he lost sight of his teenage daughters, Salma and Salwa.
I told her, Salma, get up, there's an earthquake. Then everybody woke up. We got out from the building gate here. I had Lama and Mustafa with me, and I stood right here.
Now they're missing. For months he searched hospitals and cemeteries. When everything he owned was destroyed, the few pictures he had left of his girls became even more precious.
My wife passed away 14 days before the earthquake. Every time I go through difficult times, I go to her because I know where her grave is. But I don't know where my daughter's graves are, so I come here.
So much of this place was destroyed that even now, after a year of solid work, they still haven't managed to clear away all of the destruction. Now, hundreds of thousands of people left this area altogether, but for those who stayed, the difficulties are still all around them every day, and the vast majority still don't have proper homes to live in. Tents and container villages should have been temporary solutions. Now they're bedded in, more permanent than was ever intended. Less than a quarter of the promised new homes have been built. Antakya's old city had stood strong for centuries. It may never recover, but its people have vowed to. 13-year-old Zaliha remembers the night her life was saved. Frightened and exhausted, the first rescue team who arrived said she was beyond help. But then Mersin City's fire department came and pulled her out. Today, they're back together, reunited in the same city. There are thanks and hugs and memories of how lucky their family was. Across southern Turkey, daily life remains a battle for the earthquake survivors who stayed here. And the last year hasn't dulled their pain or their suffering. Anna Foster, BBC News, Antakya.
4 key bolts on an Alaskan Airlines plane were missing from the door that blew out shortly after takeoff last month. A preliminary report says the door, which was covering an unused emergency exit, was not properly secured. Boeing, the manufacturer of the 737 MAX, has been under the spotlight recently after a series of safety concerns. Severe storms have been sweeping California, causing landslides and flooding across the state. 3 people have been confirmed dead after being struck by falling trees. Los Angeles has had more than half of the rainfall it normally gets in 1 year in just 3 days. Well, this lucky man was pulled out of a swollen river after he jumped in to save his dog. More than 1 million people were left without power. The rain sent mud and boulders down hillsides in Los Angeles suburbs, destroying homes. Now, when a major attack or tragedy unfolds, conspiracy theories and hate proliferate on social media. But what impact can that have on survivors? Mariana Spring has been investigating extraordinary cases of disinformation. She's been looking at the case of one man from Northern Ireland who survived a mass shooting in Las Vegas, and she's here to tell his story. Mariana.
Thanks, Sophie. 2017 in Las Vegas, one of the deadliest mass shootings in US history takes place. From his hotel room, a gunman fired into a crowd at a music festival with no clear motive. 60 people died, over 400 were injured. One of the survivors was Stuart McCormack. From Northern Ireland, for years he searched social media trying to find answers. What's unique with his case is that he ended up believing conspiracy theories about how the attack, which he'd seen with his own eyes, was staged by the US government.
I believe when I was talking on social media that I was being tracked by America, and if I went back to America, these were the theories in your head, if I went back to America, somebody may detain you. I'd be like, you're getting too close to the secret here.
Stuart became fixated with one particular online account, full of both facts and false theories about the shooting, from a Saudi prince being the real target, government agents posing as hotel workers, to a helicopter shooting into the crowd. I tracked down the person behind the account. He's called Joel and lives in America, and he flew all the way to Northern Ireland to meet Stuart.
I would wait and see any comment that would come up. You know, I'd have the notifications on Twitter to see your information coming through. I would be at the page instantly. I mean, in my real life, I would stop what I'm doing to keep up with what was going on. You know, the rabbit hole I was falling down in, and thankfully counselling and stuff pulled me back out of that.
Both now broadly accept these theories weren't true, And there's a warning.
There are real-world dangers to conspiracy theorizing, if you want to call it that. Because I felt like, okay, well, I'm emotionally stable and healthy, and I'm still like thinking there might be something going on here. If somebody was not in that situation, they're depressed or anxious, or they have mental problems, and they come across this, that it could cause the wrong kind of actions.
Searching for answers online helped Stuart and Joel process what had happened, but it's not without dangers. And conspiracy theories around traumatic events aren't going anywhere anytime soon. You can hear and watch more cases of extraordinary hate and disinformation on my Radio 4 podcast, Why Do You Hate Me?, available on BBC Sounds, BBC iPlayer and the BBC website.
Mariana, thank you. Now, a 2,000-year-old ancient scroll, which was found damaged in Herculaneum near Pompeii, has been read for the first time thanks to artificial intelligence. 3 students used the new technology after a $1 million challenge was launched. The scrolls were buried in the library of a luxury Roman villa after Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. This one belonged to the father-in-law of Julius Caesar. Until now, it couldn't be read because it was too delicate to open, but 3 students came up with a solution using AI to decipher the Greek letters on the scroll. And now some of it can be read at last. Written by a philosopher, it discusses sources of pleasure, referencing music and food.
We were really proud of our work, and I was really happy with what I did on the ink detection, and sort of pushing the AI limits to its extreme.
Well, let's hope many more of the scrolls uncovered will now be able to give up their secrets at last. Oppenheimer, the film about the physicist behind the atomic bomb, is leading the charge at both the BAFTAs and the Oscars. Our culture editor, Katie Razzle, has been speaking to the film's lead, Kilian Murphy, who's been nominated for an Oscar for the first time.
From dodging the undead in 28 Days Later.
Hello! Just point. What?
To a murderous gangster in Peaky Blinders that made him and his haircut a household name.
And I know what it means.
And now, the father of the atomic bomb.
If the Nazis have a bomb.
When Christopher Nolan comes to you and says, I want you to play the theoretical physicist, Oppenheimer, how do you know that you're going to be able to do it?
I need to not know. If I know instantly I can do that, I generally don't take the part, because then it doesn't represent any kind of challenge to me. And you never kind of fully know you've got it. It's never finished, the process. I had 6 months of preparation, and I went deep into it. But I could have done that for another 18 months.
Oppenheimer and a team of scientists working for the US government created the bomb that was used controversially to end the Second World War. A weighty subject for director Christopher Nolan. The 3-hour-long epic was a huge box office success.
His movies become like events. There's no one else that does it like that. For some reason, it just clicked. And people started going, and it gained this momentum. And we were all on strike at the time, so we were just sort of texting each other, just watching this thing happen. People come up to me in the street and say that they've seen the film 4 and 5 times. Which is just phenomenal and very flattering.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Chances are near zero.
Near zero.
What do you want from theory alone?
0 would be nice.
I think Oppenheimer's story is a story of the 20th century, and I think it has to be entertaining primarily, but if it's provocative and makes you think about what's happening in the world today, I think that's a really good bonus.
Over the last few years, but certainly last year and this year, we've seen the most incredible amount of success coming out of Ireland, whether that's writers, actors. Why now?
Irish people tell stories very well, I think. Just in the pub to each other, we're good at it. We have a long history of it. It is kind of phenomenal, the level of talent that the country is producing for like 5 million people. It's kind of extraordinary.
And one of them has an Oscar nomination for the first time.
World will remember this day.
Next month, Kilian Murphy may just bring that award home. Katie Razzle, BBC News.
And finally, after the King was diagnosed with cancer, he said he remained wholly positive about his treatment. Today I met some people at a charity in West London who are already being treated for cancer to ask them how important a positive attitude is and how hard it is to maintain.
It is a shock, and certainly in the first days one's head goes into a complete spin and, you know, don't know which way is up. But gradually you just kind of accept and go day by day for what's next.
There's no if, buts or maybes. It's hard. It is something that I hope no one else goes through that I know, or anyone that, you know, that has to get the news that they're terminally ill. It's horrible.
How difficult is it to remain positive?
It isn't until you go through a major life event, whether it's cancer or whatever, you go through an event where you experience it enough for it to kind of wake you up in a way. It's almost as if I see things in sharper focus, colours are brighter, I appreciate things a lot more, even though I always had what they call an attitude of gratitude.
When I was first diagnosed, I thought, right, it's not going to beat me, I'm going to beat this. And, you know, I've just stayed really positive, and people have seen how positive I am, and I definitely think it does help with your recovery.
Does it change your outlook on life?
You appreciate life a lot more. You appreciate other people in more difficult circumstances. You become more tender-hearted. You philosophise a bit more, and you adjust to the fact that life isn't forever.
Do things sort of out of my comfort zone, like last summer I abseiled down the cheese grater building to raise money for Maggie's, and that was just absolutely fantastic. I loved it.
Once you are ill, I think you appreciate more, even seeing a Robin Redbreast fly. It's so cheerful. It's great to see.
I take life moment by moment, not even day by day, because 24 hours isn't guaranteed to anybody.
The thoughts of some of the people at a support group in West London run by the charity Maggie's. Weather now with Darren Bett and snow.
Yes, it's getting colder, Sophie, so we've got the risk of some snow over the next few days in some parts of the country. So far, most of the snow has been in the far north of Scotland, and across the south of England, temperatures were 14 degrees today. But that mild air is getting washed away by this rain that's moving southwards. That's heading its way across southern England into the Channel, and following on from that, we get the colder air. And there's a band of snow to move across Scotland that could give a dusting of snow, a couple of centimetres, and some icy conditions by the morning. And we've got a frost in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England to start the day. There's still going to be some of those snow showers around, but increasingly the wintry showers will become confined to northern parts of Scotland. And many areas of the UK will actually have a dry day with some sunshine. Far southern parts of England could be quite cloudy, a bit of rain through the Channel, but it's not going to be as windy as today, and it's not going to be as warm either. 8-9 degrees perhaps in the far south at best, typically around 6 or 7 degrees in other areas. So it's getting colder, and that weather front still in the Channel is going to come back northwards again as this big low pressure spills in from the Atlantic. And that, of course, is moving into the colder air, while southern parts of the UK may well see rain as you head further north into northern England and Northern Ireland, so we're going to find sleet and snow falling as well. Now, at the moment, it's just a yellow warning from the Met Office for Thursday and into Thursday night, and the snow risk has transferred into Northern Ireland. Now, there could well be a covering of snow to low levels, but I think the worst of it looks like being over the hills, and that's going to bring some travel disruption. And that snowy weather continues in the far north of England into the night, heading up into southern areas of Scotland. More wet weather pushing up from the south, but we've still got the cold air on Friday in Scotland. Some more snow here. Further south, it's milder, and we're more likely to have some heavy rain. Sophie.
Darren, thank you very much. And that's it from us on the BBC News at 10. Time now for the news teams where you are. Good night.